That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about My Policeman, the sophomore film directed by noted theatre director Michael Grandage, which premiered at the 2022 Toronto International Film Festival, is being released courtesy of Amazon Studios October 21st, 2022, and is of course based on the celebrated novel by Bethan Roberts.
The director's first film?
Michael Grandage's first film was, I saw in competition at Berlin in 2016, which was called Genius, and it was about Colin Firth playing Max Perkins during his time working for Scribner and working with various notable artists, particularly Thomas Wolfe, who's played by Jude Law. It also featured Nicole Kidman, who Thomas Wolfe was in a tempestuous relationship with.
You read this book.
I did read My Policeman in anticipation of the film.
So I understand the film is formatted differently from the book, which we can talk about. Mm-hmm. But this movie, it's 1950s England.
Brighton, to be specific.
There's a man named Tom, played by Harry Styles. He's a policeman. One day he's out and meets a guy named Patrick, played by
David Dawson.
Patrick is like a museum director, curator. Patrick is obviously gay and is very attracted to Tom and convinces him to visit his place to let him sketch him. Tom does. They have a sexual affair, and that sort of progresses into like a regular thing. But while Patrick has accepted he's homosexual and he knows that he will always have to live sort of in the shadows, Tom does not see himself that way.
Because notably it was illegal to be gay at this period in time in this country. Yeah.
And because he's a policeman, he knows that he would be, ruined. So one day Tom tells Patrick, I've met a lady. I want to marry her because he wants to have a normal life with kids. But if Patrick wants, he can share him. So this lady Tom wants to marry, her name is Marion.
Mm-hmm.
Marion, played by
Emma Corrin. And we're talking about all the younger versions of these people.
Right. Mm-hmm. So Tom introduces Marion to Patrick I bumped into this guy and he wants to give us a tour of the museum. So he's being a little shady because he's been having sex with this man. So they all hang out and become very close friends very quickly. Tom marries Marion, and the day after their honeymoon, basically.
The day after the marriage, the first day of their honeymoon.
The first day of their honeymoon.
She has been deflowered and wakes up to...
Patrick pulls up talking about, yeah, girl, I'm going to make you guys dinner. Oh, Tom didn't tell you? Well, yeah, I'm here. And it's very clear she doesn't like this. She thinks it's weird. But everything culminates, well, kind of. I feel like there are two humps. One is she sees Tom and Patrick in the woodshed doing something nasty. Not really. They're in a close embrace, clearly being intimate. Mm-hmm. And that upsets her a lot. But she kind of pushes under the rug, sweeps it under the rug. But things go from bad to worse because Patrick invites Tom to go with him to Venice, which is not good because Marion had told Patrick her dream was to go to Venice. So now that she knows that Patrick is trying to be sexual with her man and now taking him to this dream trip of hers, and he goes
and sends a postcard.
She gets mad and writes a letter to Patrick's boss saying your employee is a homosexual. And I'm sure the patrons of this museum, particularly the ones who bring their children here, would not like that. So Patrick gets found guilty of being a homosexual and gets sent to prison for 2 years. And Tom gets fired from the police. So he has to find a new job. Then we flash forward 40 years and we see that Tom and Marion are still married, played by different actors.
Mm-hmm. Linus Roache and Gina McKee.
And Marion has agreed to accept Patrick into her home because he needs convalescence. He's had a stroke and can't care for himself.
He's now played by Rupert Everett.
Played by Rupert Everett. And Tom is not having it. He refuses to even acknowledge Patrick is there and doesn't even want him there. But the final 7 minutes of the film, which I think are the best part of the movie, she basically confronts her husband Tom and says like, basically, I know you're gay. I know you've always loved this man. I haven't been happy with you because you haven't been able to give me what I want. So neither of us, like all of us, our lives have been ruined. So I'm leaving, and you can stay here in this house and be with this man you always loved. The end.
But the bombshell that is dropped is that she tells him that she wrote the letter to the museum.
And Tom never knew that it was Marion who sort of started all this. Okay, I told the story out of sequence because the opening of the film is Rupert Everett coming to live with these, Marion and Tom, but we don't know who's who. We don't know what their relationship is. This is all told via Marion reading Patrick's journals.
From the late 50s.
Because he's kind of bedridden, so all his belongings are in her house, so she's just rummaging through his journals. I thought the movie was fine. It's beautifully shot. It's acted well enough.
I think it's funny you mentioned that because it was shot by Ben Davis, who also lends The Banshees of Inisherin, which drops the same day.
And I really liked that movie.
He really gets to play around with the cinematography. And that
So I think it looks beautiful. But after we were finished, I thought this is the most sort of polite, basic, boring story about a throuple you will ever see.
It's very dry, and I think the adage is, of course, that the film usually is never as good as the book, right? But in this case, and I kept thinking this throughout, and I can't believe this is my ultimate conclusion, is I wanted more of the woman's voice, of Marion's voice, that's just completely, it feels like it's completely lacking, because almost always when we see these, usually from straight male filmmakers that are trying to tell gay love stories, they always focus on the woman because that is who they're most comfortable with portraying. That's why Keira Knightley stands out in The Imitation Game, or Alicia Vikander in The Danish Girl. But this really demands, because this is about how women are collateral damage in the machinations of men, whether they're gay or straight. So her perspective is needed, and how the book is set up. The adaptation takes out how the book is set up, which is kind of a twin parallel stories of her writing her own stories as she's also reading through Patrick's.
Yeah, I don't have any notes because I thought this movie was very simple. Nothing really sent me. My overall thought is, I think the story should have been from the perspective of Marion and Patrick, the two people in love with this man. And I think you said the book is more true to this. I almost feel like the character of Tom, the policeman, should have even been filmed like he's not even a real character. Like he's sort of always in the background, and maybe we never even see a full-on shot of the actor's face, like its profile or three-quarter, or because I don't know that I think he's important to the equation.
He's not. He's this light that these two moths are destroying themselves against, and we don't need to understand him because he's just this selfish manipulator.
So as a story, I feel like that was not to rearrange the source material to make it more about him. I think takes away what is exciting, what is emotional, because I got emotional in the end listening to this woman and then seeing this man, Rupert Everett's character, incapacitated and lonely and sad when, those are the two people who really, Tom, who cares about Tom? Because he kind of got away with, he got his cake and ate it too.
Right, and that behavior still exists in some formats today. So,
and we see that their relationship, Tom and Marion, now that they are older, is very they're just kind of distant and cold to each other. But it's fine. They're married for a long time. They live together. I mean, it's probably most married people. But she's not satisfied. He's not satisfied. I just really wanted to delve more into this woman and how she reconciled over the past 4 decades that she knows her husband is gay. She knows that he was much more passionate with someone else who she knew very well. And she ruined that man's life. And how she dealt with that and came to the conclusion that she was that lady had to swallow a lot of her pride to let that man come into her house. And we don't get any of that.
Yeah,
except the end.
It's funny because Gina McKee has a supporting role in Atonement from 2007, and this that was one of my notes. This is really tale. It's kind of about a strange, ironic vengeance by having him come back in her home, but also as a way for her to atone for what happened.
Right. So I don't think it's it's not bad storytelling. It's just interesting that
Well,
it's like not choosing the most juicy emotional bits to tell.
The film was adapted by Ron Niswaner, who's got a lot of very famous, queer cinema under his belt, including he wrote the screenplay for Philadelphia and Soldier's Girl, which is the film that I quite like. But it makes her very one-dimensional, as having to just showing her reading through Patrick's version of the story. When from the book, Bethan Roberts gave her so many more other interesting characters to play off of, including Tom's sister, who's this woman that's perpetually pregnant in an unhappy marriage. And how the sister kind of realizes that Tom is gay and is trying to warn Marion about that ahead of time. And her a lesbian coworker that she offends when she's a school teacher.
That's another thing. Marion initially is like homosexuals are perverts. It's unnatural. When she finds out her coworker's a lesbian, she's disgusted by that and like sort of abandons her. And I guess it would have, like how you said in the book, Marion does sort of try to keep a connection with that coworker because she feels bad about how she handled it. I think I needed a little something more to explain like how Marion got from being so angry to settling into and even being okay with.
Yeah, because there's a 40-year stretch, and in the book we're made to understand that Tom they aren't sexual, and Tom goes out and has affairs that she knows about, and that's all kind of just...
That would have been this is just... Again, this movie is fine. It's okay. Like, the story is very basic, very simple, not very exciting. I didn't get emotional at all till the very, very end, which is so weird because the book sounds like something that would have had me, like, frustrated and angry and sad. And
I do think David Dawson is quite good.
Who's that?
As Patrick, the young Patrick.
Oh, yeah.
I did like him. And there's both versions of Marion, I think, are technically fine. I think Harry Styles, whose name has to be above the credits and pulls focus, I think I liked him better in this than in Don't Worry Darling, but which oddly this is the film that didn't go to Venice, even though it's got scenes set there. He's just not very captivating. There's all these descriptions about his physique and everything, and all I could think of was like, oh, what if this had been made in the 50s and it starred like a Brando or a Dirk Bogarde or Albert Finney, and couldn't have been made then, obviously, but how much more captivating that person would have been as this object of affection.
I think he's okay. Like, I wasn't constantly thinking like, oh, that's Harry Styles, but I'm also not a big Harry Styles fan. I probably would end by talking about like the controversy about Harry Styles queerbaiting, because I actually think, in general, I don't think people's personal lives really always need to play into what kind of roles they get.
I agree.
But if you do want to play that card with him, I feel like a person like Harry Styles, who does sort of play with gender fluidity and sexuality, which is probably just a marketing gimmick.
Queerbaiting, yeah.
Which queerbaiting. I think it works well in this role because this character is sort of playing with these things to just get what he wants. And for maybe Harry Styles, it's more clicks and engagement and whatever. And then in this movie, it's like, sex and companionship.
Yeah, he wants to have his cake and eat it too. Yeah. And, like he tells this man, this man that can fulfill these sexual needs that this woman can't, but the woman can, perform the social needs. I thought of the Ken Loach title, Poor Cow. He wants this woman to be just in the dark as a breeding machine, ostensibly. And then when this man that he loves goes to jail, he doesn't even bother to visit him. I just think he's kind of a terrible character and really it's not deserving of the focus. And I think the book does a good job of kind of navigating around him. I don't know. It's nice to see Rupert Everett here. I don't think he has a lot to do, but because it channels memories I have of watching, him in a 1984 movie called Another Country with Colin Firth and Cary Elwes, and kind of how far ahead of time something like that felt. I think this had the ability to be something like Merchant Ivory's Morris with Hugh Grant, but it just doesn't. It just doesn't kind of have that passion that this story has in the book.
What else do you want to say?
I don't know. I think there are very interesting things here that I think the film more or less drops the ball on. Oh, I wanted to talk about the scene. I think I don't know if it's Styles' fault or maybe the part of the screenplay is when Patrick is arrested and Tom runs home and tells his wife he's been arrested, and also basically tells her like, "Yo, by the way, I'm gay. Deal with it." I think that feels so choppy and nobody's really acting realistically, and how Marion reacts, and that doesn't feel right. And I also think, although the end is emotional and drops these bombshells that it kind of ungainly lands on, even Gina McKee's monologue to Tom at the end to Linus Roache is kind of like, oh, this just feels very rushed.
Yeah, especially when Tom tells her, like, oh yeah, they're gonna find out I'm gay and sorry, and like, wow, okay, it all built up to you just telling her. I agree. It's just very basic. That's all I kept thinking, like, after we finished, that everything's fine. Like, there's nothing particularly wrong with the story. It just doesn't. But I feel like I'm being repetitive.
But that's how I felt about Grandage's genius as well. It's like you have all these great people and this kind of very interesting material, and for somebody that's such a like venerated stage theater director, it's funny how the translation of that to the film isn't quite the same.
What would you give it?
I think 2.5.
I would give it 2.5 out of 5, which means it's okay. Anything else?
No.
Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.